Greetings, YouTube. Today I'm going to be talking about a gaming supplement, Ancient Kingdoms Mesopotamia from Necromancer Games. Unfortunately, this product does not have a table of contents, so you're going to have to forgive me as I actually physically flip through the book fairly quickly. Now, this is presenting the area of Mesopotamia, Babylonia, Assyria, that zone, during the Bronze Age, as a setting for gaming. And I think it does an admirable job. It presents in a fairly brief portion of the book, it's like 65 or 70 pages, all of the core information you're going to need for the setting. And then the rest of the book are a number of specific areas in this region which can be used for adventures. And each of these specific areas has NPCs and plot concepts. Essentially, it's a series of adventures, not by the numbers necessarily, but presented to you as a GM to be able to use in your own game. And let me, the first thing I'm going to say, the illustrations overall are excellent, but this is some of the best cartography I have seen in ages. The maps in here are wonderful. I really liked them. They just have the feel of real tombs, of an actual ziggurat, an ancient type of pyramid. Just very well done. I was quite impressed. Now the first like 15 pages or so deal with the general outline of history of this area. Talk a little bit about the city-states that are present, because while countries existed, it was very much very independent cities. And how the different areas were controlled over time by different people, including the most famous ruler of all, I think, in this area was probably be the great king Hammurabi, who the Code of Hammurabi has come down to us, available today. You can go find the Code of Hammurabi online if you'd like, which is one of the first truly codified, structured rules of law ever written down. Some very cool stuff in there. And then they get into like the specifics about the technology they would have had, the types of armor and weapons would have been available, how weapons would have been made from different items. For example, if a weapon is made out of wood, it would do a little less damage. That's for a weapon that is not normally made out of wood, like a quarterstaff or a club or a great club. They're just going to be treated as standard wooden weapons. But if you're making like a wooden arrow or maybe a wooden sword or dagger, it's going to do less damage because it's made out of wood. Bronze being the default steel, default metal. Copper was a little less effective, and then steel, iron, which would be a rare thing, and steel would be the rarest of all, almost filling the same role that adamantine does in your standard D&D game. And they talk about the different quote-unquote races in the game. Now, these are all humans in here. What they do is they present you with 6 different nations, and each nation has different stats and skill bonuses to give the players some flavor. Each one is going to have a different stat bonus. It's kind of the way Pathfinder handles it. So they're all human. They all get a +2 with no negatives, and they get a +2 bonus to 2 skills. For example, so if you want to play a Gutian, which Gutians are very much barbarians, hulking savages that believe in no gods. You get a +2 to your strength and a +2 racial bonus to climb and survival skills. This uses the 3.5 set of rules, by the way, not 3.0. And so there's 6 of these, 1 for each stat bonus. So you can very much pick where your character is from to help whatever class concept that you want to go with. Obviously, if you're going to want to play a fighter type or a barbarian, Gutian's a good choice. Then they talk about the existing character classes and how they fit into the game. And we get into prestige classes. They have a seer type priest that really focuses all about dissecting creatures in sacrifices, which is fairly cool. Let me try to avoid hitting my keypad with this book at the moment. If I hit the space bar, this will stop filming. Then we have an exorcist priest class. The Hierophant, which is all about advancing your magic abilities and fusing divine and arcane types of spell casting. A Knight of Tiamat. Remember, Tiamat is where Gygax got the term from this region. Tiamat was an actual deity, a female, only had one head. And this is where that came from. A temple reaver, which is a Gudian class, all about raiding temples and being agnostic at best, if not an outright atheist, which is kind of an interesting concept. You don't see that a lot in role-playing games. Then we have magic that deals with things like divination, exorcism, witchcraft, a bunch of new feats. Some are general, some are, of course, metamagic, which everybody's going to love the metamagic stuff. They have feats in here that are all about being very good at sacrificing animals for the purposes of divination. And what they do, if you sacrifice a small animal, so long as I think you have prerequisite, you have to be able to cast augury. If you cast sacrifice the animal, you will be able to cast the spell for free. You can do this as much as 3 times a day. There's another version that stacks on top of the first one, which allows you to sacrifice a sentient being, and that lets you cast divination itself. But of course, you're killing a sentient being, not a good act. They also talk about the fact that alignments in here are a little looser than you find in a lot of places, because a lot of the times the gods couldn't necessarily out and out say they were good or evil. You know, they had their good side and their bad side. So the alignments aren't really rigid; they're a little fuzzier. Then we have, of course, new spells. Then they talk about the religions in specific. They give a little thumbnail of each of the gods. You know, simple things like their rough alignment, domains, symbol, typical worshippers, and favorite weapons. There's one in here, which I find cool because the name of the god is Kingu, which every time I hear that name just makes me think of a Japanese monster. I know, I'm a little childish. And they talk about the overall Sumerian cosmology. They also talk about personal gods, where everyone can have a personal god, and if you have a personal god, so long as you are in their good favor, you're following their basic principles and moral codes, you get a bonus. For example, if your personal god is Anu, you have a +1 divine bonus to will saving throws. Obviously, if you're going to play a priest class, you're going to want to have your favorite god be the priest that you worship, the god you worship. They also talk about the fact that you may be able to maybe worshiping more than one god, because there's a polytheistic pantheon, which is a cool idea as well. You don't see that a lot of the time. And then you have the different chapters which deal with specific places in the area of Mesopotamia, and then we get into monsters, I believe. Give me a second. The Great Ziggurat. Just an overview of the Great Ziggurat. That right there is some just cool stuff, man. There we go. Sorry. Focusing. Autofocus is a mixed blessing. They present some monsters that were typical from that area, you know, from myth and legends of the Sumeria. But then they talk about how to take standard monsters, both from the SRD and just ones that would have been familiar to gamers in the D&D game, and how to turn them ever so slightly to make them fit into the desert region that is this setting, which I kind of like how to take the gnolls and make them a little more interesting. How to make the ghouls a little more appropriate. How to turn the gargoyles into something that fits in. The obsidian minotaur. How to make the minotaur a little more flavorful for this setting. The lycanthropes. How to make the lycanthropes fit this setting a little bit more than they would be from a standard D&D game. Something which is called a wizard's shackle. And I don't know where this came from. I think it's some kind of a parasite they modified, which is used as a control on wizards. It essentially taps into them and taps into their magic, which was kind of cool. Overall, this is an excellent product. Now, one thing I liked about this is that it has a brief passage. It's not very long. Like I said, most of the core settings, rules in this, cover the first 60 or 70 pages, and that's it. But it deals with desert environments. Now, there is an excellent book for D&D, Sandstorm, good book. I recommend it. It's fun. I enjoyed it. It had lots of desert kind of options. But it's a big book. All right? And it may be not that easy to find any longer. Whereas this has a fairly brief passage which gives you everything you pretty much need for having to deal with heat exhaustion and heavy loads in hot weather and desert storms. You know, things that you need to run a desert campaign, but it's a lot slimmer, a lot more focused. It doesn't have quite the bloat that Sandstorm did. It doesn't have all the alternative races and things like that Sandstorm did. Now, they do touch on the fact that some people are going to want to play races that aren't in this setting. Some people may not want to play an entire human party, and I can understand that. It is a fantasy game. So they suggest that people from other places, half-elves, orcs, whatever, are literally from another dimension. That they got pulled here from some mystic gate, or a spell went wrong, or they ended up here instead of the astral plane when they cast a spell. It could be that they're from an isolated place far away, you know, in our world, and that's how they found their way here. Dwarves, of course, could be from beneath the ground, as could Fae. They could be under the hills and things like that. And that's a nice idea. Obviously, you're probably not going to want to have an entire group that is nothing but freaky characters. I guess you could do that if you want. But maybe wondering why you wanted to play a game set in Sumeria, Babylonia, and things like that if you're going to do that. But it's still an interesting concept, and I like the fact that the authors were able to come forward and say, yes, we realize that this is pretty much a human-centric campaign, and you may want to add things into it that are not human-centric. So I recommend this book. It was a good read, excellent maps, a lot of good ideas. I think that any GM who read through this is going to have 24 adventure ideas by the time they finish the book. So if you like Mesopotamia, the Sumerian, Assyrian kind of a history thing, I definitely recommend this.